I'm Charles Duffy, and this is Political Pulse. Tonight we're going to talk about the story of immigration. We're going to talk about family, politics, and food, and some other things. And pleased to have on Fortunata Minutolo, also known as Dorothy Duffy, my mother. Thanks very much for joining us.
Nice to be here, Charles.
And just wrote a book. All proceeds go to charity. I don't even think there's any more books to sell. There was only 125 published. It's called Around Fortunata's Table. But what was the what was the thinking? Why did you write this book?
Well, it took about 10 years, really. I just accumulated a lot of stories and memories that were set around our round table. And then one day your sister said, "Susie, let's put it all together in a book form." And so I really wrote all these memories down for my children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and it was fun.
I mentioned that it was a story of immigration. Your mother, Teresa Minutolo, I think she had a 5th grade education. Your father, I don't think he had any education. He was an Italian merchant marine, came over to the United States, worked in the steel mills, and basically you had to teach your parents English. I just want to read a quote from the book. The people who know me today know that I'm used to speaking my mind. I tell them it is because I had to represent my mother and father, Italian immigrants who spoke broken English from the time I can remember. Whenever I had to miss school, I wrote my own excuses and signed their names. My father lived from payday to payday, and sometimes he was short. He would send me to his friend's house with a note I had written asking to lend us $5 until payday. I wrote the note at a young age. That is how my life was.
Well, I always wished my father had been more ambitious. I mean, he never even owned an automobile. But then I started to think, had to admire his adventure. How he jumped ship to stay in this country. The rest of his family migrated to South America, but he chose to come here where he didn't know the language, he didn't have a penny in his pocket, he didn't know anyone, and the fact that he was so adventurous to get off the ship and make a new life for himself. I guess the rumors were flying on the ship that the streets in America were lined with gold. I don't know what made him do that, but that's what he did.
But it was a tough experience for you. Your given first name is Fortunata, but when you went to 1st grade, your mother wanted you to sound more America, and I think somebody in line was named Dorothy, and then she gave, right there in line, she gave you the name Dorothy. But you talk about secondhand Christmas gifts. You and your sister slept in the same bed. You helped pay your parents' mortgage. You have a saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. But it was tough.
Well, the ethnic name in the 30s was tough to have because they used to call me 40. They would make fun of my name. And somehow my mother just knew I couldn't go through life with that. So when I was in 1st grade, she Americanized my name. I asked her where she got the name Dorothy. I think the Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz was popular at that time. I don't know. But that's what she did. She knew enough to do that, even though she only went to the 5th grade in Italy, had no English education, but she knew that I would have trouble with that ethnic name.
But somehow you survived. I mean, it was tough. I mentioned these things. I mean, there's a picture in the book when you're in your 20s, you have the pompadour haircut, but sometimes you went through all this and you survived and you flourished.
Well, I had a choice. It was either sink or go forward. And I just chose to move forward. I knew I didn't want to be down there. And so that worked for me all through my life. It's called survival.
I talk sometimes on the show about the randomness of life. And, there's randomness in everybody's life, but your father, Mariano Minutolo, who actually I have his middle name, but...
and I Americanized it, remember?
You Americanized it, of course. But when he came to the United States, he thumbed a ride. He ended up in a little town near Pittsburgh where, if it wasn't for that, I mean, that's where we grew up. That's where you and your husband raised your 6 kids. But, if it wasn't for that driver going to that town, who knows where he would have ended up. Another randomness story, and I want to get your comment on this randomness. But another story is when he was a sailor on the ship in Italy, and the big strong guy and the head of the company came and said, "Hey, you get off of that vessel to your father, and we need you over here to lift some things." And that night, a big storm hit, and that vessel that he was supposed to be on went down, and there were no survivors. But is there a randomness of life? I mean, things just happen randomly, or are things meant to be?
Well, when that ship docked in Norfolk, Virginia, and he knew no one there, and so he wandered through the town. And the story he told the judge when he had to go before the court was that the ship left, and he got there too late. Whether that was true or not, I don't know. But anyway, there was a pickup truck going to Pennsylvania, and he got on the back of it, hoping he couldn't stay in Norfolk because for fear the authorities would get him. And so that's where it all began.
But what about this point about the randomness of life? Do random things just happen to people, or are things that happen are meant to happen?
Well, I call it divine intervention. That's the word I give it, because when things happen, they're meant to be, and you go along with the flow, and you're led, and you're guided, and directed, and somehow it all falls into place.
So what happens is meant to happen.
Meant to happen, meant to be.
You know, in this book that's called At Fortunata's Table, because it's about a lot of it's about food, your recipes, and things like that. But you mention people in the book. You know, people who were of no means, but who helped you and your parents. One of them, John Tellerico, I think he was a coal miner. Your mother wanted to buy a house, and she couldn't get a loan from a bank, so John Tellerico, who I think he was your godfather,
right,
lent her $2,000,
right,
which I'm sure was his life savings. You had another person, Pearl Arnott. She helped Grandma after you were born. She helped your mother after you were born. She was also there when your mother died, the day your mother died. Her husband, Pearl's husband, put your parents together, set them up on,
right,
put them together. But these people that were always there. I mean, there wasn't a lot of money, but there was people there helping.
Well, it's that thing again, Charles, where people are sent to you. They're meant to be. They influence your life. And so be open to all that. You never know who's going to come to your door. You never know who's going to enter your life. Be open, accept it, and there's a reason for all this, and this is what happened.
You know, this is a political talk show. Oh. So we have to talk about politics.
That's my favorite subject.
And of course, your husband Roger F. Duffy got into politics, and you got into politics also. And I want to talk about that. But first, I want to talk about this man that you married, Roger F. Duffy, an Irishman. You're Italian. He was Irish. I think the story was at your reception after the wedding, all the Irish were at the bar, all the Italian were eating at the tables.
Right.
Married 52 years. The late Roger F. Duffy had 6 kids.
Well, politics was a part of our life, part of your life growing up. You sat around the table stuffing envelopes. In fact, I'll never forget what you said to us once, that you thought the word poll only meant telephone polls. You didn't know it meant the election polls also. And so we encourage you to get involved in politics, because all our lives are affected by politics, the schools, the hospitals, industry, everything. And that kind of got into your blood, and you just, I like to think that's why you like it.
But Roger Duffy, he was fought in the Battle of the Bulge in World War II before he graduated high school. Came back, graduated high school, was a door-to-door salesman, but eventually got into politics. He was the mayor of our small town. He became a state legislator in Pennsylvania for 12 years, but he was not a typical politician. He was not outgoing. He was not one to trumpet what he was doing. I mean, he was a quiet guy.
Well, he knew it was when you're in politics, it's an opportunity to help people. So he had this thing that that was one way of helping people, which he did. And so you know, we grew up in a Republican area, and he was the first Democratic mayor in our town, and he went from there, and he did a lot of good.
But ultimately, there was a little bridge between our towns, and it was called a viaduct, and it was named after him. But you know, he always said what he thought. He did not temper. I mean, he would tell you. You always knew where you stood with him. I mean, you know, I interview a lot of politicians. I'm not sure. I've run into only a few who kind of say what's on their mind exactly. And he didn't. You know, he wasn't worried about sparing anybody's feelings.
Well, I don't know if you remember the incident at the state capitol when they were demonstrating and marching. They were cutting the welfare benefits and so forth, and that bothered him, that the one legislator was going down to stop this, and he went after the legislator, and so they had a little brawl. So, you know, he was after the little guy, the underdog. He went out to.
He was for the little.
He was for the underdog, and that was his way of doing things.
You also got involved in politics, and somehow we lived near Pittsburgh, a county of 600,000, and you ended up running for commissioner of the whole county, 600,000. And I'll never forget, you know, you had the parade in downtown Pittsburgh. You took out a permit. I think there was 15 or 20 people in the parade, and you were leading the parade, and you had your family there, and it was in the front page of the Pittsburgh Press the next day. But your slogan was, "Why not Dorothy?"
Why not Dorothy Duffy? The reason I got it.
But why not Dorothy Duffy? The slogan. I mean, that could be a slogan for your life.
Well, why not? Why not? I went through life saying that. But I think I ran because I didn't want my opponent to win. Because if he would, at that time we went into home rule, and if he had gotten the power that the executive director would have, he would have appointed all his friends. And so I made them spend money, and I made them work hard. It was fun.
But politics is tough, and I definitely saw that firsthand. Dad, Roger Duffy, ended up losing his seat in the Pennsylvania legislature after 12 years. He voted for a pay raise for legislators who. And the thing that always bothered me is his opponent then took the pay raise after Dad voted for it. You lost in your race. But Dad, Roger Duffy, always said you meet a lot of nice people in politics, but it's very tough and can be brutal.
Well, that's true. He always said, in spite of what you hear about politicians, we always met the nicest people through politics. He loved it, and I loved it.
And talk a lot in your book, and we only have about a minute left to break, but you talk a lot in your book about family. In Italian, it's called La Famiglia.
La Famiglia.
And from these courageous grandparents or parents that you had who came over here from Italy, did not speak English, from Dad's Irish ancestors who immigrated to Pittsburgh. You created 6 kids and 16 grandkids and one great grandkid.
Well, we didn't have much, but what we had was a lot of affection, love, caring, good food, sat around the table, talked about everything, good things, bad things. That's where everything was discussed, and we just thought everybody lived like that.
Why don't we pick up with the family topic? Right now we're going to take our break. Tonight's guest, maiden name Fortunata Miniatolo, current name Dorothy Duffy, my mother.
Packers. United.org.
Back with Dorothy Duffy and talking about your book At Fortunata's Table, which is about everything, immigration, family, politics, life in general, but just about family. Somehow you and your husband, Roger, the late Roger Duffy, sacrificed, put 6 kids through college somehow. And one thing I always stands out in my mind is that he always had that comment, no matter how educated we got, you would tell us, hey, the answer to this question is common sense. It's not on page 90. And that really brought us back.
Well, especially it sticks with my son-in-law, who's an orthopedic surgeon, and with him everything is scientific. And so every once in a while, when I talk about just common sense and so forth, and I remind him, it's not on page 90, every once in a while I find him or I hear him repeating that line, which is something.
Well, we do have a tendency, I catch it in myself. I tell my kids, you know, some of your sayings, another one of your sayings is, do good and forget about it, do bad and think about it. Did you make that up or did you hear that somewhere?
That's, you want to hear it in Italian? Fa bene e scordati, fa male e pensaci. And that's the name of the game.
So you kind of lived your life like
Absolutely.
that. Yeah. But I don't know. I was yesterday was a snow day at school and work. Everybody was tired after sled riding. We all went and took a nap, and yesterday was kind of I thought it kind of summarized your life. It was kind of or summarized who you are. It's kind of capsule. So I'd taken a nap. Everybody had taken a nap, and here I come downstairs. The dining room was pretty dark. You had taken the extension cord from the Christmas tree, and you were making these Italian cookies called pizzelles at the dining table all by yourself. You had mixed up the batter. Everybody else was sleeping. The mailman came to the door. You said, "Hey, Charlie, go give the mailman some cookies." There were 2 high school girls raising money who came to the door. Give them some cookies. And Melissa here at the station, she said, we got to give some for Melissa too. But it kind of struck me as I was thinking about this interview, kind of you know, this energy, the kindness, you know, the cooking, the keeping moving, all mixed in, you know, with love and kind of a little bit of wackiness.
That's what it's all about, Charles. Food brings people together. You know, when I come to D.C. to visit my children, I have 3 children living in the D.C. area. I love going from kitchen to kitchen, cooking all their favorite recipes, and I happen to know where everything is in their kitchens, and bringing all these people together. That's what food does. And so you just keep sharing and giving, and it's amazing how food has this magical way of doing this.
You're 86 years old. Another thing you always do is you're even when you were doing yesterday, you're making pizzelles. I came down, you were showing me articles from the newspaper that you thought were interesting. You're always sending us articles or pages out of magazine articles, things like that. But what's the secret of life? You just keep going?
Well, just enjoying everything and enjoying your family. Staying connected is very important. I love the way your siblings stay connected with each other, and like Susie, our oldest, is pretty much the glue in the factory. So I think I think you all talk to each other every day, and so it's so important. A couple things: remember your roots, where you came from, and staying connected.
But I'm not sure we talk to the siblings every day, but we talk to you every day, and you're kind of the hub. And you kind of are information central. Everybody calls you every day, and then we have to call you and see what everybody else is doing. I mean, I don't know how you have the time to talk to everybody.
Okay, I can't handle the iPad and the iPhone and all. I want to hear the person's voice. And so when I pick up the phone and I hear one of my children's voices on the other end, I'm satisfied. That fulfills me. And so the iPad, the iPhone, internet, you know, I have all that, but I'm not interested in that.
Do you think about your parents and the people? I mentioned a couple people who helped your family along the way, but you know, your parents had to endure a lot, you know, coming over here, and I mean, your father was almost sent back to Italy because he was not a we don't have to go into the background of that story, but he was not a proper citizen. He was almost sent back to Italy, but they endured a lot. But you know, today you're 86. I mean, do you look back and do you still think about that?
Well, I think about that to a certain extent, how they, number one, made something out of nothing. They didn't have all of the luxuries that we have today, and just watching them make something out of nothing. As I mentioned before, my dad did not have an automobile. We walked everywhere, and so that kind of stuck with me. And I still do that. I don't know if it's because I was a depression child or what, but it's almost like a game to try to make something out of nothing and watch it happen.
But you look back at the landscape of your life. But what kind of you think about your life? I know you like to look forward, but you look back. What kind of pops out at you?
Well, first of all, I start with my name, Fortunata. I'm very fortunate. I'm very blessed. I have my health. I have wonderful children. I can pretty much do what I want to do, go where I want to go. I just feel so fortunate, so blessed, so lucky. And I just stay in the state of gratitude every day.
How about political? I like to ask my guests, they're political heroes, but you look back, and I think you were born in 1927 and grew up in the Depression and lived through World War II and events like John F. Kennedy's assassination, Martin Luther King's assassination, a lot of tumultuous times, but you lived through a lot. But who would you say, living or dead, your political heroes?
Well, I'll start with Franklin Roosevelt. I can remember just sitting around listening to his fireside chats and listening to the radio, and I thought, what a courageous man, and how he really saved us from Hitler and from disaster. I mean, to me, that was the turning point in my life. I thought, wow, a man like that could do what he did, and it started there.
What was it like day to day, like in the Depression and then in World War II? What was it like living in those times, especially, for somebody like you family without means?
Well, the rationing, standing in line for sugar and cheese and the things they would give us with the stamps. We had food stamps and turn the electricity off and just do without, make do with what you didn't have.
But how about the World War II? What was that like, a scary time?
It was a scary time, but it was also exciting that the Americans were over there helping and fighting, and that we would be okay as long as they were over there. And it was the USO, the dances, the soldiers coming and going. And I was a teenager, but I got caught up in all that.
Mm-hmm. Going back to politics, I know your late husband, Roger Duffy, he was in politics, but what kind of made him, or why did he throw his hat in the ring? And his campaign staff was, your 6 kids. We just sat around the table, stuffed envelopes, licked envelopes, put stamps on envelopes, knocked on doors with them, and kind of interesting. But why did he originally throw his hat in the ring?
Well, I think I go back to our town was predominantly Republican, and he was a Democrat, and so he kind of wanted to make a difference, and he thought this is and so for the working person, for the underdog, he wanted to get in there and do something for them and help them out.
But he was basically a moderate conservative person, and really, I'm not sure you could put a party label on him, but he kind of said what he thought.
Well, again, I don't want to repeat myself, but it was an opportunity for him to help people, and the only way you could do that is to hold an office, and so it was worth it to him to campaign and to sacrifice being away from his family, so he had an opportunity to help people.
What did your parents, who were immigrants, really never learn to speak the English language? I mean, what did they think about him getting into politics?
Well, they didn't live long enough to see all that, but they always admired him, that he was a very smart man and that he could make a difference, and he did make a difference in many ways.
How about another question I like to ask guests is fork in the road in your life? Like, looking back, did you have forks in the road where somebody helped you and go one way versus the other?
Well, I knew I could never go to college because my parents couldn't afford to send me to college, so I had to take the commercial course while I was in high school, to typing and shorthand, so I could get an office job so I could bring a paycheck home. And so I'll never forget having this opportunity to work for a famous neurosurgeon and psychiatrist in the Cultural Center of Pittsburgh, which was right next door to the University of Pittsburgh. And so that opened up a whole new world for me, because I came from a little suburb town, and here I was in the big city, and I was able to work for a doctor and go to school, to go to the University of Pittsburgh at night. That was the turning point in my life.
How about, I mean, a lot of the books about food and Italian recipes, and you're like a storm. You visit people's houses, and you got 5 things going on the stove. Sometimes I have to remind you to turn off the stove. I think yesterday I ran the dishwasher twice, did dishes twice, but how does that kind of fit into the whole puzzle?
Yeah, I do have a bad habit of using every pot and pan, but the recipes in my book were very simple. They're not complicated. I don't measure anything, but they're tasty. And these are recipes that my grandmother used in her primitive kitchen, when she had 10 children and 14 coal mining boarders. And they're the same recipes that I use in my daughter's luxurious Williams-Sonoma kitchen, where she has 2 refrigerators, 2 of everything. So those recipes never get old, and they're simple and tasty.
Food and family plays an important part of things.
Absolutely. It brings everybody together.
And I love the story also. I'm sure he hates to brag, my brother, or your son Roger Duffy Jr. I mean, he really a pretty famous architect in New York City, and you were working temporarily at Carnegie Mellon University, and he was kind of majoring in something else at the university, another university, and you said, hey, you told him, hey, you might want to look into this architecture program, and so key in his future success. And you kind of come up with these ideas, and somehow they work out and are.
Well, he was always doodling. He was always drawing. I figured he had some kind of artistic talent. So when this program came up, if you took a 6-week architectural course, you were automatically admitted into the School of Architecture. And he was kind of, floundering and didn't know where he wanted to go. He took the course, he loved it, he found his niche. As a result, he ended up.
But you had a part in that. It was one of your ideas that, you saw something on the bulletin board.
Well, it's this Italian thing that I have,
What's that called? Is there another saying for that?
Well, it's that intuition and ingenuity that the Italians have, and here I go bragging again, but I can't help it.
What keeps you going? We just have about a minute left, but you would look back. But every day, what kind of keeps you going?
I'm glad I am who I am, and I'm glad I have the opportunity to do what I do, and I'm very grateful.
And I got to take you to the airport right after this. You got to head down to one of your other, see a couple other of your kids.
Right, where the sun shines every day.
That's right, it's snow on the ground up here. You got to
Right.
get out of here. But anyway, tonight's guest, Fortunata Miniatolo. I think we're all fortunate to be in your sphere, also known as Dorothy Duffy, my mother. Thanks so much for coming on.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
And thank you, everybody, for joining us. I'm Charles Duffy. This is Political Pulse. We'll see you next week.